What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining. I know this is not normal to do an evening show. We usually do them in the mornings or in the afternoons, but we got a special guest, just a little bit today. So just so you know, for anybody who's watching who is new, I have been doing a lot of interviews with a lot of the local candidates because voting in local elections matter, but also finding out who those people are on the ballot, not just by party, not just by propaganda, not just by signs, but finding out who they really are, getting to know a little bit more about them in an unbiased type of view. That's what I've been doing the past 3 months, just interviewing people, especially that are being overlooked by the national media, or not the national, but the local media. So that's what I've been doing. So I've been trying to shed a light to all these people that don't get light shined upon them, because they are on the ballot, right? Regardless of whatever it is, money should never be an issue. Should always be somebody who should be given equal time. And so yeah, that's what I've been doing, and I just want to keep highlighting those things in our city, and hopefully in our state as well. But without further ado, the real reason why we're here. I want to go ahead and introduce our next guest. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Eric. It's great to see you, man. we haven't talked since October, have we?
Right. And just to give everybody a quick background, I met Spike on the campaign trail. So last year, and I hosted you here in San Antonio. That was nerve-wracking for me because it was kind of thrown onto my shoulders. I was like, you want me to what now? And it's like, yeah, we want you to host Spike, vice presidential candidate. I'm like, are you? So it was quite the different type of terrain for me. But I don't know. How did you like the event? How did it, in your eyes, what was it like?
I was gonna say, if you said it was thrown together, or it was kind of a last minute thing that you were doing it certainly didn't seem like it. We had well over 100 people attend that event. That venue was packed. I love when I would do an event and I would, have the people in front of me and then people down here and then people here. Because of the layout of the venue that we were at, it was like a outdoor veranda area at a bar and grill. And I was talking to folks, 50, 60 feet down this way. And then, to all the people here. I mean, it might have been close to 200 people that were there. I mean, we packed whatever the limitations were. We pretty much packed them. And you did a great job with your talking. Everyone did a great job with the booths that were set up and everything. I think I did a interview with Libertarios Hispanos while I was there. I think that was
it was Los Libertinos. They're local podcast. Yeah, local podcast here, and I was their first interview candidate, and so that was really cool. And then they were able to interview you. That was big for them too.
Yeah, no, it was cool. It was great. I mean, we did events. At least one event a day like that across the country, 35 different states, something like 100 events. That was one of the ones that stuck out as, wow, this was put together really well. Like it was very, very well attended. Again, during a pandemic, during the lockdowns, during all that stuff, everyone's a little bit more like, do I really want to go be around hundreds of other people outside? But we had great attendance. The AV was great. I learned to really appreciate that. If the audio video was good, or the sound system and everything.
That was good. My brother-in-law. My brother-in-law did that.
He nailed it. Your brother-in-law killed it. What's your brother-in-law's name?
Eric.
Eric. Oh, that's
Eric.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. You're both Eric. Yeah, the Erics. Yeah. And isn't your sister's name the same as your wife or something like that? Or
my sister's name is the same as my sister-in-law, and yeah. It's a weird thing.
Yeah. I knew there were multiples there, but no, Eric absolutely killed it. You killed it, Eric. I think it was a great event. I think it went very, very well. I'm happy. I can't wait to go back to San Antonio. I also got to, when I was there, I got to see the Alamo with my friend Darren. And I also I knew that there was an ice facility there. And so we were going to do a live stream there where I stood in front of the ice facility and said why I thought that the building should be torn down. Turns out government was already way ahead of me. The building was being torn down when I got there. And I'm like, well, mission accomplished. So we ended up doing a video called, instead of abolish ice, we called it demolish ice. And I said, if you look at this facility, but it was perfect because as they're tearing it down, you can see inside. It was a prison. Whatever they were calling that facility, it was a prison. There were prison cells. There were the toilets in each cell and everything. It was a prison that they were putting families and children in for the crime of wanting to come here and usually escape political violence back in their home countries in Central America. But it was really an incredible thing. So there were a lot of cool things that happened there. I got to do my demolish ice video that went viral. I got to see the Alamo with my friend, and then I got to hang out with y'all and have a really fantastic event there in San Antonio.
And that was pre this whole mess that they've been doing with the Alamo and reimagining the Alamo and making it into like they wanted to basically build a wall around the Alamo just like how it used to be, and that was compliments of George P. Bush. So
it was great when we were there. We just got to walk around, and we didn't pay whatever it was to go in and do the actual museum. We just walked around on the outside and read the different things, and did the typical tourist selfies in front of the Alamo and all that stuff. But they put a wall in around.
No, they wanted to, and they wanted to basically close that whole area so it wasn't public anymore. So you had to only go in. And then it's also another waste of taxpayer money. It was about $400 million of money being spent to reimagine.
$400 million to build a wall around the Alamo.
Well, basically, and make it look like how it used to be back then. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a good stewardship of taxpayer money. Geez.
And Rachel says she was there in October. I thought it was great. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Matt Pina, also he also ran as well against George P. Bush as a Libertarian, ran and didn't win, but one of those things was that was his thing, was fighting against the reimagining of the Alamo, which was another waste of taxpayer money.
What a massive waste of money especially for a city to waste $500 million to revamp the Alamo to be less open to the public. Yeah. That's about the dumbest thing I can think of. They're certainly not going to get it back in additional revenue, because if I didn't even know it was, we were having a hard enough time finding it. And when we finally saw it, I'm like, that's got to be it. This old 1700s building in the middle of downtown that everyone's walking around. That's got to be it. If there had been a giant wall there, we probably would have been like, I don't know. Maybe it's somewhere else. But yeah, no, we got to. And my wife got to go to the San Antonio Zoo, but I didn't have time to do that. I had to make my demolish ice video, which was a way better use of my time during the campaign. But I'm happy to go back, man. At San Antonio, I liked it. I got to eat at the Riverwalk there, and I like the vibe of that city, man. That's really cool.
Well, you gotta let me know when you come back. I'll take you to the real spots. The real spot.
I will definitely do that.
Yeah. So talk about your podcast, because I know you have a podcast, and me and my wife were watching it last night while we had a tornado warning. We had a tornado warning here, and so tell me about your podcast and what you highlight on there.
So I actually have two shows. One is called The Muddy Waters of Freedom, which is what we had last night. That's usually on Tuesday. This week was switched around. Usually The Muddy Waters of Freedom is on Tuesdays, and on Wednesdays is my other show, My Fellow Americans. This week we had to flip them around because Joe Biden's address was his non-State of the Union, State of the Union. I don't know why they didn't call it a State of the Union, but his address to Congress, which usually they call a State of the Union, was on Wednesday. And, Matt and I always live stream those types of things, my co-host. So we did that on Wednesday. Usually on Tuesday nights, we have the Muddy Waters of Freedom. And that is where my co-host Matt Wright and I go through the week's events and present it in sort of a humorous, entertaining, putting a libertarian spin on things. We'll sometimes have guests that come on to talk about a specific thing they're working on, or an event that just happened, or some newsworthy thing that just happened or whatever. But for the most part, it's just us going through the week's events. We also have a call-in segment where we answer questions that our subscribers leave to ask for us to answer. We talk a lot with the people in the comments. It's just kind of a cool hangout thing where we go through the week's events. And then the on Wednesdays, I have my show, My Fellow Americans, and that's where I have a guest on, usually some kind of prominent figure. My last guest was Seth Stoughton. He was actually the one of the expert witnesses in the Derek Chauvin trial. The guy who murdered George Floyd, and so he was on. He's an expert in police use of force, former police officer, and he's a law professor, and he testified in that trial. And so we talked about police brutality and the different factors that have led to police brutality happening. So that's the kind of stuff that we have on that show. And yeah, that's what I do on it's on Muddied Waters Media. So if you go to muddiedwatersmedia.com, or if you look for Muddied Waters Media anywhere, any social media, any podcasting platform, where Muddy Waters Media is everywhere. And that's where we do all of our different shows from.
All right. Does that look right?
Muddied Waters.
Oh, so, shoot. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's okay. MUDDIED waters.com, media.com. Yeah, when I say it, I always try to enunciate like Muddied Waters Media, because people think it's Muddy Waters. But honestly, if we'd be smart, we'd go. In fact, let me write that down to get muddywatersmedia.com, because you're not the first one to do that, and then that way I don't have to tell people anymore. But yeah, that's what we do on that show, and we have a lot of fun with it. When we started, when Muddy Waters Media was started, the goal was to have fun first and foremost, have a cool conversation with people who aren't libertarians, and kind of bring them into our ideas, and then share our ideas with them, share a libertarian take on the things that are happening, because they're certainly not hearing that from pretty much anyone else. So at least in the, I guess, normie circles. So that was the point of the show, and we have a lot of fun, and we've grown quite a bit over the years, and we really enjoy it. It's a really cool thing that we do.
Yeah. Wesley says, as someone who lived in SA for 20 years, I visited, I'm assuming, the Alamo twice, and that's it. No way they're making their money back.
There's no way. There is no way. I'm there on a hot day, not hot like unbearable, but like a nice, warm, sunny day, an ideal day for people to go to something like that. And there were, I don't know, 50, 100 people there. I mean, there were some people there. And I know it was during the lockdowns and all that stuff, where things are, or just even the pandemic in general, people are a little bit less likely to want to crowd together for stuff. But yeah, they're not making their money back on that. I doubt they're making enough money to pay for their expenses. I'm sure the taxpayers fronting some of that cost, which, it's a historical site or whatever. I get it. But yeah, $400 million. There's no way. That is about the dumbest thing I've heard.
And the biggest problem that we're seeing here, especially talking to all these candidates that I was doing for this local election, a lot of these businesses that are downtown or just businesses in general are getting away with 75% rebate on property taxes, whereas all the homeowners and renters have to foot that bill. They're brunting that bill of having to pay higher rise in property taxes because they want to build a high rise or a company. They want to let a company build and get 75% off a rebate from their property taxes. So, how do you change that? How do you change that mentality, and how do you get those people to say, no, this is not going to start? We got to put an end to it.
Is this in San Antonio or your county? Or
yeah, this is in San Antonio.
In the city of San Antonio, businesses get a 75% property tax rebate.
Right, and even more. Some are just, they don't have to pay any property taxes. There's you could look at one Embassy Suites on the south side and one Embassy Suites on the north side. North side's paying about, I don't know, $700,000, and the south side is nothing, $0.
So I mean, I'm a libertarian. I don't like any taxes for anyone, right? But if you've created a system where things are paid for through taxes, and you have these people over here that are generating the income, that are generating the most income and are using the most resources in order for them to be able to generate income, and then they're leveraging, they're taking their costs, for building the infrastructure and maintaining the infrastructure necessary for them to be able to make all this income, and they're making a bunch of people who are just trying to make ends meet. They're not making hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. They're making tens of thousands, hopefully, and are trying to make ends meet. You're making them pay for all of that. That's a terrible arrangement for the people living in San Antonio. I think the biggest thing is, if I were living in San Antonio and I wanted to get that message out there, number one, I'd get really familiar with the numbers. What are the exact amounts that are, being paid out by different groups and things like that, so that you can point to some egregious cases to be able to say, hey, this Embassy Suites is making this much money a year in revenue, and they're paying, this much in property taxes, but they're using up this much in resources. All this road and infrastructure work that has to be done to maintain what's needed for them to be able to make all these millions of dollars, and you're being stuck having to pay for it. That's not fair at all. That's a very easy message to sell as a libertarian, especially if you turn around and you don't just say, well, we want to shift the tax burden to the people that are paying, that are making all the money from it. Yeah, absolutely. But also focus on, the tax burden shouldn't be that high to begin with. Or better yet, why aren't these companies taking care of this road and infrastructure directly? Why don't they just build them for the cost of it and make them pay for it? Since they're the ones using it, just bill them directly for it. Forget the whole tax system, the tax structure. Just say, hey, listen, you and these handful of companies are the reason that this work has been done in this road or whatever. This is your share of the cost of that. That's far more fair and equitable, and it's also more libertarian, because it actually puts the cost for something on the people that want it and are benefiting from it, instead of laying that cost out and externalizing it out to a bunch of other people who aren't making anything from it, and are just making it harder for them to be able to make ends meet, because they're having to pay for all this stuff that they're not benefiting from. That's how I would handle that. And it fits directly into the libertarian message. Taxation is theft. And when you use a taxation model, it leads to the wealthy using the poor and middle classes to pay for all the stuff they need to be able to stay and become even wealthier.
Right. And you made a note yesterday during the State of the Union when Biden was talking about taxing the rich. Can you explain what is the downfall of that and why it won't work?
So here is the thing, Eric. When we talk about taxing the rich, we have to actually, because it's easy for me to go, well, you know what the problem is here? These rich people are making all this money and they're making you pay for it. We need to tax them for it. That sounds great. Here's the problem with that. And this is why I actually focus more on saying, make them just pay for this thing directly instead of creating this tax structure. When you say, let's say we have a progressive tax system, okay? Let's say, and the most progressive tax system you can think of. Let's say, whether we're talking property taxes, income taxes, whatever. Let's say that unless you make $100,000 a year, you pay nothing. You pay nothing on the first $100,000 a year that you make, which means the vast majority of Americans wouldn't pay a penny in taxes directly. Okay. And then from 100,000 to, let's say, $1 million, it starts going up quickly. Okay. So from 100,000 to 250,000, you go from 0% to like 25 or 30%. And then from 250 to 500,000, you go up to, let's say, 50 or 60%. And then from 500 to $1 million, you're at like 70 something. And anything over $1 million, let's say we tax it at 95%. Okay. Some ridiculous number. We take almost everything. The government takes almost 100% of it. Okay. Now, let's pretend for a second that everyone's still going to go and work just as hard and make just as much money and create just as much jobs and do just as much investment if they get to keep 5% of what they've made. Let's just pretend that for a moment, okay? That obviously wouldn't happen, but let's pretend it does happen. Any tax that a company has to pay is simply added as overhead to the cost of the goods and services that they sell to you. Okay, so whatever they get taxed, they just go, all right, well, the good costs this much to make, and we want to make this much profit. Well, but we got to add this tax too, so now it costs this much more, which means that you as the consumer, whoever is the final consumer of that product or service or good or whatever, is the one that's basically paying the tax. Well, the poorer you are, the higher a percentage of your income, up to and including 100%, is spent consuming stuff. When you're rich, some of your money goes into investments, some of your money goes into savings, some of your money goes into real estate and things like that. But when you're poor or middle class, all or most of your money is being spent just buying and renting stuff that you need to be able to live, which means that the poorer you are, the higher a percentage of your income is being spent. The higher a percentage of your, basically the higher your de facto tax rate is. If you're the end user, the end payer of all those taxes, then that means the poorer you are, the higher percentage you're paying for stuff, a higher percentage of your income you're using to buy stuff, which means the higher your de facto tax rate is. And that's with a 100%, progressive tax rate, the likes of which could never actually be passed. Not only is all taxation theft, but all taxation is regressive. All taxation ends up being paid by the end user, by the people that have the least. Every government program, every government giveaway, every bailout, every even welfare program, every tax system is an act of taking money from those with the least and giving it to those with the most. Now, you're probably thinking, but why would they do that? That's not fair. They don't care if it's fair. What they care about is padding the pockets of the people who bought and paid for them to be in office. This entire system is just a shell game where politicians are put in office by powerful people, wealthy people. Then they sell you on these scams where they go, oh, we're going to take care of everything for you. All we need to do is just tax the rich. That'll pay for it. And you go, well, that sounds good. I get stuff I need and they get taxed for it. Yeah, sign me up. But really all they're doing is just adding to the cost of what it costs for you to live, making you more reliant on them because you can't make ends meet, making you more reliant on these kind of scam programs. But the reality is they're just taking more and more and more from you and handing it off to those powerful people. Joe Biden's on his State of the Union, whatever you want to call it, saying, last year, the wealthiest got wealthy at the highest rate ever while everyone else suffered. Well, first of all, schmuck, that's because of the lockdowns that you and everyone at the state level imposed on everyone, where you shut down all the small businesses and you kept all the big businesses open. And the ones that you couldn't keep open, you just gave them massive bailouts and stuck us with the bill for it and gave us $600 and $1,200 to make us feel like we were getting something, and then sticking us with the bill with interest for the whole damn thing. That's why we're poorer and they're richer. But second of all, if you're so concerned about how rich they are, and if your plan is going to make it so much fairer and take money from them and give it back to us, why the hell did they give you $200 or $300 million in campaign funding last year? Why did the wealthiest people give you and Donald Trump nearly something like just over $500 million just in your two campaigns, not to mention the billions more they spent in Democrat and Republican campaigns for Senate, Congress, and governor and state rep and all these other races across the country? Why are all these crony billionaires giving you billions of dollars if you're so concerned about, it sounds like they're in on it. It sounds like they realize that you're just feeding us a bunch of BS so that you can sell us on the next scheme to take from us and to give to the rich. That's the reality of taxation. When government doesn't have to actually provide value to get the money that they're getting from you, when the reason that they get the money from you is because you have to give it to them, or else they'll put you in jail or take your business license or take your home or take your car and any assets that you have, then they don't have to provide you with any value. They can take as much as they want. They have to scam you just enough to get you to keep voting for them, but that's really it. If instead you shifted away from taxation to a model where these companies had to pay out of their own pockets for these things, instead of just being able to tax it, on everyone else, they do it more efficiently. If the company is being told, hey, listen, we're going to spend a fortune, we're going to spend way more money than it costs to actually build this road or this bridge or, this upgrade to the power grid or these new, street lights or this new facade construction we're doing. We're going to spend way more than it costs, but don't worry, we're just going to throw the tax cost on the, we're going to give you a rebate for all of it. We're going to hit the homeowners for the taxes. They don't care what it costs. But if instead you go, hey, we needed to do this, 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 and this, and if you want it to happen, here's your share for the cost of that, those businesses are going to go, no, I think we'll take care of it ourselves, because they'll be able to get it for cheaper, because now they're the ones actually paying for it. So when you shift it from a model where the people that are involved are the ones who actually want it to be done and they have to pay out of pocket for it, they're going to find much more creative and much more efficient and much more effective ways to do it than a government that does not have to provide anyone with value. They can just keep taking more from you.
Yeah, and that's something that we saw a lot of the poor neighborhoods, that their infrastructure is jacked up, right? Yep. They're still paying those taxes, right? But their infrastructure is not being taken care of, and we're busy worrying about a lot of these. Oh, let's build a high rise, let's build a hotel, let's build all this, and we're not taking care of the basic needs that a city council should be doing, right? So, and I'm hoping people realize that this is happening. That we keep contributing to this constant revolving system of we're paying our taxes, we're raising our taxes, and we're not even getting the basic necessities that we need. And especially, I know we had a couple of people ask for street lights, and the city was like, no, we don't have money for it. Street lights. So
to stay safe. And again, if you're in an inner city area, first of all, just traffic safety, it's a good idea to have streetlights, but also public safety. A lot of times when people are doing criminal activities, they're going to pick the darkest areas to do it in. What a coincidence that the poorest neighborhoods are also the ones that have the least priority for streetlights, just for basic public safety.
Yeah. And that's a problem. That's a problem. And the thing is that so this group asked for a street light on their street. They didn't get it. They did a GoFundMe, raised their own money, and put their own street light on their own street that they needed for $200.
Yep.
So
and it's a perfect example. So it cost them $200 to do it. It probably would have cost the city $5,000 or $10,000 to do that same street light, just because of all their stupid regulations and their labor contracts and everything else, and all the bloat and bureaucracy involved in getting anything done at the city or county level. But they just pay it out of pocket. I got another one for you. A guy that's a guy named Thomas Queter. He lives in New York, upstate New York, and he's disabled. He has a very rare genetic condition, and basically he has to have a wheelchair, but it's a special type of wheelchair because his bones break very easily, and because they break very easily, he grew. He didn't form correctly when he grew, so he has. Because of how his body is shaped, and because how easy it is for him to break his bones, he needs a very specific type of wheelchair that's basically made for people with his specific condition, which is pretty rare. He's on disability because he can't work. He's like, he can't walk. He's not able to work, or at least not full time, or he wasn't able to work. Now he actually is very busy. The state of New York disability, they got him 3 or 4 different wheelchairs. They spent something like $80,000, $60,000, something like that, not to mention all the bureaucracy costs of going through the red tape to get it. But they spent tens of thousands of dollars just on the chairs, and all of them made him worse because they weren't made for him. He'd get thrown out of them, they'd fall over, like all this bad stuff happened because they weren't designed for him. They were just designed for someone that needed an electric wheelchair and not for his specific needs. So after breaking his bones however many times trying to use their chair, which was actually making him worse, he went and did some research for himself, and he found out he could get a chair for, I think it was like $6,000 or something like that. So he set up a GoFundMe, and he said, or a Kickstarter or whatever it was, and said, hey, can people donate to this to get me a chair, and it'll save taxpayer money, and I won't have to use them anymore for my disability needs because I'll have this chair. He was able to raise the funds in a matter of, I think, just a few days, maybe a couple weeks, something like that. And they got the chair, and his life has done a complete 180. He's now very active in the community. He ran for state legislature up there. I actually went up and helped knock on doors with him. He went around the entire neighborhood in this chair. We were all tired, walking around, and he was fine. He was in his chair. He was able to do everything. He rarely has any accidents or anything like that. And usually they're, user error. There's something he did, but he doesn't really have any accidents anymore. He's able to have people over. He cooks for himself. He's doing all this great stuff because he's able to actually live. And it cost pennies on the dollar what the state was spending, because it's all the difference between when you have to pay for it directly and make sure you get the best value for your money, and when some third party government agency comes in and robs the crap out of everyone and then decides one day whether or not they want to provide you with the stuff you need from all the money that they took from you. One of the sayings we say in the Libertarian Party is that, government walks up to someone, breaks their legs, steals their wallet, uses a little bit of the money to buy them some crutches, and says, hey, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have these crutches. Well, no, if it wasn't for you, my leg wouldn't be broken and I'd have my wallet. Now give me my damn wallet back. We show up and we're not here to take their crutches from them. We're here to say, hey, listen, you wouldn't need those crutches and you'd have your wallet back if you didn't let these people do this to you. And so what we do is we go and we give them their wallet back. We help them get back on their feet so that they don't need crutches eventually. And then they're back to walking around with all the money in their wallet. That's what libertarianism proposes, is putting people back in charge and ending these con games and shell games and scams that politicians and cronies have set up.
Right. And I don't think I ever told you this, but last year when I ran, right, in the state of Texas, the Democrat and Republican Party sued the Green Party and Libertarian Party candidates off the ballot because they didn't pay the fee or the fine. I call it the fine because it's a fine for the state of Texas. And I don't know how it is where you're at, but in the state of Texas, you have to pay the fee, but that fee goes back to the party itself. For the Green Party and Libertarian Party, that's the state of Texas. It stays with the state of Texas. So, so
that's such a scam. Yeah.
Right. So that was the thing with that. And luckily both parties lost, but it's in a sense, I mean, I don't know if I would call it voter suppression, but it's a type of suppression that these people are doing.
It's a type of voter suppression. It's suppressing the options that voters have. It's also a blatant violation of the First Amendment. Part of the First Amendment, and this is in the Federalist Papers, part of your First Amendment right to peacefully assemble is to contest for public office. All of these restrictions they've put in place, there is absolutely no constitutional justification for them at all whatsoever. In fact, initially, the original ballots, when they used to have them, they didn't have names on them. They just had empty slots. Who do you want for president? Who do you want for vice president? Who do you want for whatever, town council? Who do you want for governor? Who do you want for... And you would fill in who you wanted. So then what started happening was, as the political parties started forming, they said, well, it would make it a lot easier for vote counting, because most of these votes are going to a handful of people anyway. It would make it a lot easier if we had some options on there for them to pick from. And then from there, if their option wasn't on there, then they could write in their choice. That's reasonable, right? And then after a while, they went, well, we can't put all these options on there from all these different parties, so we're going to have to really limit who we can get on there. So we got to make sure that they're seriously running. So we'll make sure that everyone gets at least 50 signatures, 100 signatures, just to show they're serious. They're not just wasting our time to get on the ballot. And then that turned into, you got to get 50,000 signatures to be able to get on the ballot in some states. You got to get 10% of the total vote count just to even get on the ballot, which is ridiculous. Or you've got to spend thousands of dollars, but only if you're from a third party. If you're a Republican or Democrat, you're automatically on there. Or like you said, you've got to pay the fee, but it just goes right back to your campaign or your party. But everyone else has to go to the state. Because that's, you want to talk about a double standard there. That's definitely not equal protection. That's where all of that came from. If we just went back to what the founders intended, where you just have for president and vice president, boom, boom, two empty, or one empty name, just fill in who you want there. Congress, boom, just fill in who you want there. Senate, boom, just fill in who you want there. Governor, whatever, all the races, just fill in who you want there. If you don't want anyone, you want to vote for yourself, you want to vote for your friend, whatever. If these people, and they say, well, that just makes it harder for the legitimate candidates. If you aren't able to get enough people to write your name down, unless it's already there with an R next to it or a D next to it, then you suck and you shouldn't be running for that office. So, I think just doing that, it would go back to what was actually constitutionally prescribed, which is you, the voter, just writing down and choosing who you wanted for a candidate.
Yeah. SB says, because there's too many funds provided to police. I think that was something about the funding itself. So in San Antonio, the funding for SAPD is about almost $500 million. Public safety, it's $800 million. So they're about a little bit more than half of the funding for public safety, which is a big chunk of our general fund. So right now,
in the wall.
Yeah, and supposed to be Donald Trump said we had a wall, supposedly. So I don't know.
Well, see, George P. Bush was just trying to make that campaign promise true. We have to build Trump's wall around the Alamo.
So right now there is a battle right now, a heated battle between a group called Fix SAPD and the San Antonio Police Union, San Antonio Police Officers Association. Right now on the ballot is a proposition to repeal Chapter 174, which is basically repeal the contract. I'm drawing a blank here. The collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah.
So that's right now on the ballot, and the police union is really pushing for that not to happen. So what are your thoughts on the police unions? Because I know I posted it on my social media, but I want people to, if they didn't hear it, what is your take on police unions?
So first of all public employee unions are illegitimate, and here's why. A public employee union, whether we're talking a police union, a teachers union, or whatever, it is an organization that is funded by taxpayer dollars that then takes those taxpayer dollars to go and spend money lobbying to advocate for more taxpayer dollars. It is an organization that is built around getting funds that were not given to it by the people that paid it, that people are not voluntarily giving taxes. They're doing it because they don't want to go to jail. And so they're basically taking stolen funds, and then they use some of that money to advocate for more stolen funds. So, and for less responsibility and accountability for the people that are part of that union. So we want the people that are in our union to do as little as possible for as much as possible. Now, that makes sense if you're representing, Teamsters, or if you're representing people working in a auto manufacturing plant, or people working the docks, or people working in a marina or whatever. That makes sense for that kind of labor. They're trying to get as much as they can for the work that they do. The problem is this is taxpayer funding. I'm not their employer, but I'm the one paying for it. So to remove me from that equation and simply have this be negotiated and lobbied between the people who stole the money from me and the people who are receiving the stolen funds from me, while leaving me completely out of it, that is not collective bargaining. That's a shell game. And so that needs to end. Now, that arrangement's bad in any kind of public employee union. But a police union is a public employee union that is representing people who have been given the authority to use violence against us to bring us into compliance with the law. That puts a whole different level of importance on the fact that they're pushing for more funding and for less responsibility and accountability, because you now have an organization whose interest is in making it so that when bad officers do bad things to us, that they're held as little accountable as possible. Now, putting aside just how immoral that is and how wrong that is for people to advocate for people not to be held responsible if they do something wrong, like the rest of us would be held responsible if we did something like that. It also creates a culture of unaccountability in that police department. It creates a culture of police looking the other way or not reporting things because they know nothing is going to come from it. No one's going to be held accountable. And if anything, they're the ones that are going to get in trouble or be held over, for promotions and stuff like that. So why would they do it? So they just, keep their head low and stay below the radar and try not to ruffle any feathers. That creates this, this thin blue line culture of not allowing police officers to be held accountable, which then creates more corruption in police departments, which then creates more of discord between the police and the public, which then makes the police feel like everyone's out to get them and get even more, sheltered and even more cloistered together and feeling like they're going out into a war zone to fight against the enemy. It's just a downward spiral. And the problem stems from the fact that, yes, these police unions have to go. They're a major problem, but it's much more than that. The majority of what police work is now is collecting revenue for the state and putting people in jail for victimless crimes. This creates a massive adversarial role between the police and the public. Instead of the police being seen as someone who are there to just protect you from getting robbed or assaulted or raped or murdered or coming in to punish someone if they do that to someone, instead of being there just to protect the lives, rights, and property of the people, they're mostly there to make sure you're not doing something you oughtn't be doing and putting you in a cage if you do it, or giving you a ticket because your taillight's busted, or giving you a ticket because you don't have a seatbelt on, or giving you a ticket because of a seatbelt, but then they say that they smell weed because they don't like your look, and so now they're giving you a hard time over that. When you get rid of victimless crime laws, okay, when you get rid of the war on drugs and the war on guns and the war on sex work, when you stop using police as a revenue generating agency, if they see someone with a broken taillight, you put it in a system, they send you a letter warning you about it, letting you know you have, 60 days to fix it or something like that. That's a much better way to handle that than to pull someone over and give them a hard time and use it as an excuse to search their car. When you get rid of all this stuff, and when you end things like qualified immunity so that police officers are actually held accountable if they do something bad, and when you end things like the 1033 military surplus program so that the federal government stops unloading military equipment into police officers, they're giving them military equipment and then giving them military training for that military equipment and then unleashing them on our cities. They've been sitting there learning how to use breaching equipment and freaking tanks and drones, and then you're wondering why they're on a wartime footing patrolling our neighborhoods. They were trained to do that. So stop that. And the civil asset forfeiture program, where federal and state governments are robbing people, taking their property because they've been accused of a crime, not convicted, but accused of a crime. And then if they're found not guilty or the charges are dropped, they have to go to court and fight to get their stuff back. That's just outright burglary. And it's billions of dollars a year that are being stolen from people. We have to end that. When you end all of these things, then now the police aren't robbing you. The police are not. You also need to end immunity for politicians and judges and prosecutors too, not just cops. Anyone in a position of power needs to be held accountable when they do bad things, just like you and me and everyone watching or listening to this would be if we did something bad. They need to be held at least as accountable as we are. If anything, they should be held to a higher standard, but at the very least, they need to be held as accountable as us. Exactly. When we hold them accountable, when we get rid of victimless crime laws so that they're only out there protecting us, when we get rid of all of this revenue generation so that they're not just out there trying to raise nickel and dime us to raise money for the state, and when we hold bad actors accountable there, in places of government, then we begin to heal that rift between the police and the public, and we can start to see real reform. And also, we also need to decentralize the police. Your police should not be an extension of state police, which is an extension of federal police. They need to be there based on what your community, maybe not even, city of San Antonio is large enough. You may need to split it into a few different communities and let each community decide, what do we want our police and first responders to look like? Meaning, like, what do we want their policies to be? What do we want them to respond to? What do we want the numbers to be for people to call based on different things? If someone's having a mental health crisis, do we want the police to come out, or do we want a social worker to come out, which costs less and is actually more effective in that situation? Let there be community-based policing where people who live in that community and who are being empowered by people in that community to do what it is people in that community want them to do, that helps solve a lot of the rifts, that helps stop a lot of the abuse. And we need to do all those other things as well. But you do that and we can actually be happy when we see police officers, instead of, making sure we aren't violating some freaking weird bylaw that isn't even hurting anyone, so that we don't end up getting charged $300, for some dumb thing, like, oh, did I forget to signal or something like that when I turned on this road by myself.
So
that we can hold people accountable.
That actually happened to me while I was putting out campaign signs for justice of the peace. I got pulled over at 1:00 in the morning.
Yep.
Nobody was behind me, just a car behind me with its brights on. I moved over, right? I still used my blinker. He pulled me over because I didn't use my blinker. And the story changed, his attitude changed when I told him I was running for JP.
Yeah.
it changed real quick.
And there was nothing, anyone with common sense, including that person who pulled you over, knew that there was nothing you were doing that was any danger. This is like the proverbial driving up to a stop sign, but it's 3 a.m. and you can see both ways that there's nothing coming. So you kind of slow down and go across it. And then out of nowhere, an unmarked cop that had all of their lights off, pulls you over for doing that. It's like, how did you just benefit the public by doing this? Right. But here's why they did it. Because it raises money. They get to hit you with a $200 fine, $150 fine, whatever it is. And then if you've been hit enough times, then you got to pay for special insurance to be able to keep your license, or you got to pay to do a defensive driving course that the state pays for. It's all just revenue generation. If you decouple public and traffic safety from generating revenue, that would also go an incredibly long way, because it de-incentivizes all these pulling over. You pull people over because they're an actual danger to people around them, not because they're going 6 miles over the speed limit, or because they crawled through a red light instead of coming to a complete stop and waiting 2 seconds, or because they changed lanes at 1 a.m. with no other cars on the road, without using their directional or whatever. You can take now, instead of it just being hall monitor, aha, I caught you doing a thing. Now it's actually like, was this a danger to the public, or is this okay? Because it's not tied to money and funding.
Yeah, but Joe Biden wants to change that, though, isn't he?
Joe Biden wants to increase funding for police departments for training. Let me ask you something, Eric, and folks in the comments, you can let us know in the comments. Do you need training not to murder people? Like, just straight, do you need training not to murder someone who isn't like threatening your life, like who isn't actually trying to kill you? Let me ask you another one. Recently, there were some police officers, this was, I think, a couple of years ago, they got caught stealing $250,000 in rare coins. And the courts ruled that they had immunity from that, because I see that, Rachel, we do not. And that's probably a common answer. In fact, if someone says yes, reach out to us, because we like to help you. I want to make sure not to murder people. But these police officers, they got caught, I forget where it was, but they got caught stealing $250,000 worth of rare coins. And the court gave them immunity because, well, they should know that they can't steal money, but technically this wasn't money because it's not currency that's still in circulation. Can you imagine using that defense in court? Your Honor, I know you're not supposed to take money, but this is rare antique money. No one's using gold coins anymore at the bank. Clearly, I shouldn't have known that this was a crime. And the judge goes, oh, okay, yeah, no, you're good. Just give it back. Like, that's the unaccountability. Now, there are politicians, including Joe Biden, who will look you in the face unironically without breaking a smile and say, yeah, the problem there is they weren't trained. Do you need training to not steal $250,000 worth of coins? Do you need training not to pull over a sex worker and tell her that you'll let them off if they do something sexual to you, which is rape? Do you need training to not beat someone up because they asked you why you, or we just saw this in Virginia Beach, where the guy Caron, I forget his last name, but Caron, however you say his name, the guy who was a active duty U.S. Army.
Oh yeah,
and he gets pulled over in Virginia because his plates, his license plate was a temporary plate. He had just bought the car and it was inside of the window. So when they were first pulling him over, they didn't see it. But by the time they pulled him over, they saw it. Why didn't that stop end? Instead, they come out with their guns out and they tell him, get out of the car. Well, he's under no legal obligation to get out of the car. And he says, I don't want to get out of the car. I'm scared. Can you tell me why you're pulling me over? So they answered that.
Supposed to do.
What you're supposed to do. He has every legal right to say, I'm not getting out of this car. And he was so polite. Can you please tell me what's happening? I don't feel comfortable getting out of this car. Please just let me know what's happening. Like, I would have been less cordial about it, right? And he was smart to record it too. Do you need training to not pepper spray someone for legally asking you why you've pulled them over? This is not a training issue. This is an accountability issue. If those officers, and it's looking like those officers are going to be held accountable, which is good. That means that other officers.
Go ahead. In San Antonio, they had an officer give a homeless man a sandwich filled with feces.
Was that in San Antonio?
That was here.
Okay. No one should need training. You should know by the time you're 6 that that's not cool, right? Like, you should know that's not cool. That guy doesn't need training, assuming it's a guy. That officer doesn't need training. That officer needs to be held accountable for that. And more importantly, the police departments need to be actively looking for people that look like they're going to do this kind of stuff and route them out. They need to encourage their fellow officers to be essentially snitching on their officers if they're doing this kind of stuff. These are people who are given badges and guns and given the authority to enforce the law, all of the law, which is impossible for anyone to know, which means they're enforcing what they remember of the law. I mean, there's tens of thousands of laws just in, it took 3 years to fire this guy, right? And that's a perfect example of it. So these are people that are authorized to use whatever violence is necessary, whatever force is necessary to bring you into compliance with their understanding of the law. Not only do they need to know the law very well, but they don't need training to not abuse you. They just need to be held accountable if they do abuse you, and they need to be encouraged to find and hold accountable people that are going to potentially abuse you so that it doesn't fall back on them. So here are some other things that need to be done. Number one, Eddie's settlement that happens, like these settlements we saw with the George Floyd killing or the Breonna Taylor killing, that needs to come out of the police pensions. That needs to come directly out of what these folks are going to retire on. All of a sudden, they aren't cool with this stuff anymore. All of a sudden, even if they're given a lawful order, they turn around and go, Sarge, this could go really bad. A no-knock raid on someone's house at 3 a.m. I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, because they're responsible, it's not the taxpayer or at least not directly, because the pensions are taxpayer money, but it's money they've already gotten. Right? They don't get to get extra money. Instead of having the frickin' city of Louisville give $5 million, the same taxpayers that are having to deal with those same cops, or the $25 million in Minneapolis or whatever it was, which I'm not against the fact that those families got that money, but the wrong people paid it. It needs to be paid out of the police unions. Police officers need to be able to get liability insurance to be able to serve on any police force. And not only that, but that insurance needs to be private insurance. Because, and here's why it needs to be private. If it's government insurance, the government will just pay whatever the cost of the insurance is. Okay, great. It's just the taxpayer paying another way. But if it's private insurance and they're not getting bailed out, they're not going to insure you if you've got a bad record, which means you can't get a job as a cop anywhere if you can't get that insurance. That's another way to hold cops accountable. And it's not just cops. We should be doing this to judges. We should be doing this. Anyone that is put in a position of power and authority over others should be held at least as accountable as the rest of us are, if not even more so.
Yeah. And so tell me this, how do we change? Matt says in San Antonio, only 20% of the police officers reinstated were done so by the police union rules. The other 80 were reinstated by the police chief. The chief is appointed by city council, someone we don't vote for.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me this. So how do we stop the way Washington runs? Right. I don't know if you've ever seen if anybody's ever seen the documentary, The Swamp. The way they have to fundraise to be able to stay in those seats, they have to fundraise. And in order to be on committee seats, right, you have to fundraise hundreds and thousands of dollars. I think
Nancy won't even consider you. Yeah.
Right. Nancy Pelosi, what was it, like $5 million she raises just to be a Speaker of the House? Is that something you think can change? Because that's been like that for quite a while now, and until we stop that, nothing's going to change.
It can change. It has been for like that for a while, and it's getting worse. Here's how it changes. We have to go to root causes for many. We have to go to a root cause, and then the root cause of that root cause, and so on and so forth, until we get to how to actually fix this. So the reason that they've got it set up this way, that you have to raise however many millions of dollars to get on the committee, is because this isn't built around how much can you get from cronies to get into office. How much can you build up our party by getting money from cronies? Well, in order to get that money, you got to promise favors. Let's say, okay, someone running for president raises what, $1 billion to run for an office that the salary is $400,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There are favors that no one runs for an office. No one spends $1 billion of other people's money to get a job that pays less than $500,000 a year without paying off a lot of people. What's the root cause there? The fact that they can even do that in the first place. The problem is that we've given government so much power and authority that they're able to use it as a favor to pay off people who put them in office. When you give government this carte blanche to be able to do whatever they want, they can use that to create regulations that benefit big businesses and hurt their smaller competitors. Or they can give tax carve-outs where these companies don't have to pay taxes and the rest of us have to pay the additional taxes that they're not paying because they're still using it's like you were talking about with the businesses getting tax rebates, all of that kind of stuff. But at the federal level, they get no bid contracts, sometimes for billions of dollars. Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, he also owns a cloud computing company he was bidding for a $10 billion Department of Defense contract. Okay. You don't think he was padding some pockets to try to win that contract? Right? Like,
no.
God, he's going to compete on the up and up like any self-respecting multi-billionaire crony would. This is what happens when you give government power. When you put too much power in the hands of too few people, they use that power to impose themselves on you to benefit the wealthy people that put them in office. You are creating the infrastructure for them to scam you. It's like the ultimate, if you look at all the worst parts of a multi-level marketing scam or a Ponzi scheme or something like that, a pyramid scheme, but with the difference being in all those other scams, you can choose whether you want to be a part of it or not. With this one, you simply have to be a part of it. You have to pay into it, whether you like it or not. When you create that kind of scenario, it's going to necessarily and inevitably lead to this kind of corruption. The answer is to dismantle it. Now, how do we dismantle it when they're the ones that have all the power? They don't have all the power. You are the power. And this is what I mean when I say you are the power. Imagine a situation where there's actually a picture of this that I've seen before. And imagine there's someone who's standing on a pedestal and he's ordering around a crowd of people and he's telling them what to do and he's telling them to give him money and he's telling them what, how they have to live their lives. But if you look closely, he's actually on the edge of a cliff and his pedestal is on this long board that's hanging out over the cliff. That board is being held up by all the people that are standing in front of him that he's ordering around. And if enough people look down and go, wait a second, if I wasn't standing here, if I just walked away, that guy would fall into the cliff, or he'd have to come off that pedestal and live with the rest of us, and live normal and humble like the rest of us, or he'd just fall into the abyss there. I just need to stop participating. Well, that would be easy enough if that were the case, but it's worse than that. On the edge of that of where people are standing are enforcers making sure you stay there, but that's not the real thing keeping you there. That's just for the handful of edgy people that try to figure it out on their own and get pushed back. But if everyone, for every one enforcer there's like 100 people standing there. Those enforcers aren't keeping you there. They're the illusion of control. Here's what's keeping you all standing there. You're not bothering looking at that person that's ordering you around. You're busy arguing with each other over who should be up on that pedestal. That's our system. That's why they've got Democrats and Republicans at each other's necks. That's why they've got you fighting in the streets, literally. That's why they have y'all arguing over, well, this person's a communist because they vote Democrat. This person's a Nazi because they vote Republican. And meanwhile, Republicans and Democrats work together every single day to screw you over and take as much as they can from you to pay off the cronies who put them in office. Now, first, before we can address any of this, we need to, before we can get rid of these politicians and replace them with politicians who recognize that you've been robbed of your power and your freedom and your money, and that that's what's leading to this bad outcome, we need to show people in our communities as libertarians why it's like this. That's why it's so important, you and others that are running for local races, getting involved in your communities, not just running for races, but pushing for certain legislation and referendums. I'm going to be in Ohio on Monday, pushing for something called Ohio Accountability Now, where we're pushing for specific police reforms that we want the voters of Ohio to be able to vote for. And they're bringing me in to talk about that. Doing stuff like that in states and cities and counties across the country, presenting a real and viable alternative to the same Republican BS that they've been shoving down our throats for the past several decades. When we do that, when we show people that they're not alone in thinking that this whole thing is a joke and a scam, that they're not alone in thinking that Republicans and Democrats are all in on it together, and when they aren't alone in recognizing that there has to be a way out of this, and we show them that we care about what they're going through, that we're going through it too, that we recognize how we got here, and then we can take them on the journey for how our solutions fix these problems, then we can take over city councils. Then we can take over county councils. Then we can take over state legislatures. We can take over governors' mansions. We can take over entire state governments. We can take over the Congress and the Senate and eventually the White House. We can take all these clowns that have robbed you and kick them out of office and replace them with people who are going to take all that money and all that freedom and all that power that's been stolen from you and put it back in your hands where it always damn well belonged. Then we can fix this. But we have to go to the very root of it, which is connecting with people where they are and showing them that we care and that we have the solution to fix all of this.
Right. Yeah. And you know, and I just want to be clear, especially because I have met a lot of people during my interviews, and not every Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or whatever it is, they aren't all contributing. No, like especially Democrat, because those are the ones who we're really talking about, right? Not all of them are contributing to this mess, right? There's a lot of genuine people that want to do things for good.
Of course.
There's just this mentality of we have to do red or blue, and that's it.
Yep.
Yep. And like I said, I met plenty of people that are so awesome and kind-hearted and everything. There's just a different lens that I have, and different lens that you have, that we're like, wow, this is jacked up. This is a messed up system. And we wanted, I know me personally, I want to do it with compassion and be able to be that bridge between what my thoughts are, and do it that way. Because honestly, shouting at people saying no, you're wrong, I don't think it's going to work.
No, it's not. And to be clear, when I'm saying Democrats and Republicans, I'm not talking about Democrat and Republican voters. To some extent, I'm not even talking about some of the local elected officials that really did go in there to try to make a change. I'm talking about the Joe Biden's and the Donald Trumps and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Mitch McConnells and the people that really control things, and most of the governors and most of the large town mayors and stuff like that. These are people that are in positions of power precisely because they played the game, and they're a part of the con and the shell game. The average Republican or Democrat voter, even a lot of Republicans and Democrats in city councils and county councils, even some that are even participating in this joke, they don't even know there's a better way. They just think this is how you have to play ball. And by the time they get if they work their way up to the federal level, they've lost any semblance of any kind of principle. They're so into the game. That's really all it's about now. But the thing is, this is not about Republican versus Democrat versus Libertarian, or independent versus old party voter. It's not about black versus white. It's not about rural versus urban. It's not about north versus south, or it's not even about low income versus middle class or anything like that. It is about the vast majority of the people against a very small handful of incredibly powerful and cynical people that are robbing you. And the reality is, I have met libertarians that go to their city councils and they make converts in the city councils. They may not join the Libertarian Party, but they'll go there and say, hey, listen, we really need to end this. This is not a good policy, and this is leading to bad things. And I can show you how it's leading to bad things. And by ending this, we can help, reduce suffering, or we can make things better in this city. And they go, yeah, okay, that sounds good. Or they'll do it at the state legislative level. Like, there's a lot of good things that can get done. This police accountability now thing, we have a good feeling that this will be able to get passed, and that we'll be able to get the voters to vote for it as a referendum, and that the state legislature will vote for it. If they don't, anyone who fought against it will fight to get them replaced in office as much as possible. But no, this is not some kind of fairy tale where there are some people that are 100% good and some people that are 100% bad. This is just the reality of power. When too few people have too much power, it just inevitably leads to corruption, and it leads to harmful and abusive and inequitable outcomes for the vast majority of people. It's really just about taking the power back, recognizing the power that you have, taking your power back, decentralizing the power, putting the power back in the hands of you and your family and your community to be able to work together to be able to solve the problems we're facing. When it becomes that kind of arrangement, instead of this, handful of very powerful people, hundreds or thousands of miles away, ordering everyone to live a certain way and taking as much as they can from them. And it comes back to individual people and communities working together voluntarily and creating the society that they want to see where they live. That leads to much better outcomes. And that's what we're moving forward. This isn't about fighting. This isn't about division. It's just the opposite. It's about uniting people behind the reality that we don't have to live this way. There is a much better way to live, and we can do it. We do best when we are most free. And that's what we're fighting for.
Awesome. And then I know you've been part of the Kennedy show on Fox.
Mm-hmm.
How has that been, and how did that come about?
So Kennedy reached out to me after one of my tweets went viral about something. I forget what it was about. It was one of my tweets and her producer reached out and said, actually, I think did she reach out, or producer? One of them reached out first, and then the other one reached out shortly afterwards and said, hey, would you like to be on the show? I said, yeah, absolutely. So I went on one time and just did a one-on-one with her, and I've been on, I don't know, I think 10 times now since then. And I've become pretty much like a weekly thing at this point. And it's funny, between Kennedy and RT and USA Today and a few other things, I have gotten more national media attention than Joe Jorgensen and I got during the entire campaign. And that's not a dig on Joe, because it's not a dig on me either. It just goes to show, like, major media is more likely to give libertarians attention during the off season. Although, to her credit, Kennedy did have Joe on her show either once or twice. I don't remember how many times, but it's opened up a lot of opportunities. My whole goal in all of this, Eric, has been, all last year, as I'm going around the country and talking to local media, talking to national media, talking to anyone that'll listen to me, and trying to spread the message. My goal was to take that and continue running with it, and continue not running for office, but running, on the momentum of that, to get as much attention to our ideas as one human can. I am not in this for my own personal promotion. If I were in this for my own personal political ambitions, I wouldn't be in the Libertarian Party. I'm in a red state, in a red county, in a red city. I'd run as a Republican. They'd occasionally let me say liberty stuff, and I'd get elected to whatever I got elected to, city council, state rep, Congress, whatever. And I'd get to occasionally say libertarian stuff, and then I'd vote Republican down, whatever they told me to vote, I'd vote that. And I'd have a nice cushy living. I'd make, six figures a year. Whenever I retired, I'd get to do speaking tours, and, I'd get nice vacations paid for by the cronies who put me in office. That's not what I'm here for. What I am here for is to spread a message of unabashed liberty, and that the reality is not just liberty saying, oh, we should be free, but explaining that our not being free is also why we are not as prosperous as we should be, why the cost of living is going up, why the cost of things like healthcare and housing and higher education and food and everything else is going up, how not being free also makes us worse off in every way. We are not being made unfree for our own good. This cage may look pretty, but being out of the cage and being able to fly free would lead to so much of a better life for all of us. And that is the message that I'm spreading. And if I can do that on Kennedy, or if I can do that on, on this podcast, if I can do that wherever I can do that, audiences of all different sizes, I'm happy to do so. And to whatever extent I can do that, as long as my body lets me do it, I'm happy to continue doing it. I'm grateful for you having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming on. I mean, it's definitely been a journey, and I wanted to use whatever little platform that I had to just keep our community help with resources and what happened here in February. We had a winter storm, which we're not used to, and it knocked out the entire Texas grid, right? Because I guess we're the only one. Our state has its own grid, and people were getting their resources from me, and not the city government itself. And
people working together to help each other. Exactly.
Right. And that's kind of like what you're saying is to help each other and be there for each other. And you don't have to have resources like the city government has. That you could just do it just by your phone, and just doing something simple, using what you're good at, and to push that forward. But thank you, Spike. I appreciate you coming on. I promise, man. I swear, you better call me when you come back down.
Oh, listen. As soon as I have anything planned in Texas at all, whatever it is, wherever it is, because I know Texas is a large state. I've learned that. I'm like, I'm going to be in Texas, and someone's like, where? And I'm like, I'm going to be in Conroe. And they're like, I live 7 hours from that. I'm like, well, listen, it's Texas. So I'm just like, so anywhere in Texas, you will be one of the first people that I reach out to, even if it's on the other side of the state. I'm not letting you know that I am technically in the confines of your state, or will be soon. So, no, hey, man, I really appreciate this. I think it was a great conversation. Keep doing what you're doing there, man. And for the folks that are watching this, reach out to Eric if you haven't already. See how you can get involved, especially if you're in the San Antonio area or really anywhere in Texas. Libertarians taking back our communities and showing how it's supposed to be done is the first and most powerful step to us getting the victories that we want. This is not just about winning office. This is not about the Libertarian Party becoming the lesser of three evils instead of two, right? This is not about replacing red and blue with red and gold and blue, or red and gold or blue and gold. This is about setting people free from cages. This is about setting families free from camps. This is about ending wars. This is about ending theft. This is about ending mass murder. This is about putting power back in the hands of people and families and neighborhoods and communities so that we can all thrive and prosper together. And to whatever extent that you are helping with that, I say thank you, and I'm honored to be working with you. And Eric, again, thank you for having me on, man.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, everybody, for joining and making those comments. If you would like to get a hold of Spike, how can people get a hold of you or ask questions or, anything? How can people get a hold of you?
So Muddied Waters Media is my shows that are on that platform. And you can find that on anything. My personal is Spike Cohen, and you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. My website, spikecohen.com, is coming out any day now. I also am traveling. I'm in a different state pretty much every weekend this year. And so I'm more than likely going to be coming to a state near you. So stay in touch on my social media, and I regularly update people with what I have coming up. And if I'm going to be anywhere near you, come on out and see me, because everywhere I go, I try to do at least an hour or so of Q&A, answering questions from I did that in the San Antonio event. I asked probably about an hour and a half of questions there. I'm always happy to answer people's questions. I think it's far more important for me to answer the questions you have than for me to just go there and give some speech about whatever I think you should say or I think you want to hear. So come on out, answer your questions. I do selfies and autographs. I'm very approachable. I'd love to get to meet you. So, but you can follow me on my social media as Spike Cohen on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And then also Muddied Waters Media on everything, on all the podcasting platforms, on all the social media platforms and everything else. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, definitely. And for any of the viewers as well, if you would also like to donate to this podcast, you could do so down below. Hopefully we'll be doing some more interviews with other people as well during this, since the elections are going to be over pretty soon. want to go ahead and continue this, and also just do some valuable resource information, like I said, with Texas Department of Insurance, with how to protest your property taxes, and different things like that, different topics that we can kind of help educate, and help our community get out of this for right now. And hopefully we can change, like, it's exactly everything that we just talked about. Hopefully flip this script around and get our people empowered and get our people to where we're not having to suffer like this. So, but thank you, Spike. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, man.
Yes, sir. All right. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you.